So now we're going to begin the ethmoid bone. Remember, the ethmoid bone was that really weird monster-looking bone. We've got 6 features that we're going to look at on the ethmoid bone, and then we're going to also pick up one of the bones that we haven't done yet, so the inferior nasal concha. So here's our things to study. So let me show you how the ethmoid bone sits in behind your nasal bone. So it kind of looks like this. And so a lot of your sinuses, your ethmoidal sinuses are in here. So that weird looking bone sits through here. Our models don't necessarily do a great job. They're pretty good how it sits. So it's got a little bump up here, and so it's sitting behind our nasal cavity. So that's why we can only really see that pulled out. I'm going to show you how you'll see it in the skull as well. So let's begin, and we're going to begin with a feature called crista galli. And I kind of tell this in a little story to help you remember these 3 things. To me, when I first started teaching anatomy, crista galli sounded like a girl's name, so crista galli. And crista galli lives at a house, and sometimes we call a house our crib. So she lives on the cribriform plate. And unfortunately, because she lives next to an olfactory, which is kind of a smell thing, olfactory, her house kind of stinks. So, and there's little holes in that lets her smell the stinkiness. So let me show you where crista galli is, and then we'll label our little thing together here in a moment. So here's that weird structure. I do have it so that it the pointy thing is pointing up, because this little pointy thing that's pointing up is crista galli. So crista galli, that's the little point there. And this flat surface here, so this flat surface, that is not the name of it. Flat surface is not the name of it. So I'm just going to put parentheses. It's not the real name. That is what it's sitting on. And so that is the cribriform plate. And then you can't really tell about this, but there's these tiny little holes, and your olfactory bulb, and when I show you the olfactory bulb, when we do some dissecting of the brain, I'll show you where this is. But these little bulbs, your olfactory nerve sits on that, and little rootlets from your nerves goes down, so that when you breathe, it goes up, and this hits to your brain. So these little holes, these are each little foramen, so we have a plural for the word foramen, and it's called foramina. So foramina is the plural for a single hole, which is foramen. So this is the olfactory. Olfactory means smell. Foramina. Okay, so you have this drawing on your page, so you can label that. Crista galli, the flat surface is the cribriform plate, and then you have the olfactory foramina. Here are that cavity in there. Again, remember that's that key word we've got going on in here. That is going to be the ethmoidal sinus going on into that bone there. All right, so there's on that. Let me show you here. So there's that sphenoid bone that's there. So we have already labeled that one up, or you maybe haven't watched that video yet. We'll label that one. That's the sphenoid bone, and I'm looking at the top view. And so there is that foramen magnum we got going on. Here is the ethmoid bone. So if we ask the name of that bone, that entire thing is the ethmoid bone. That is the ethmoid bone. The little pokey feature, that's why the raised feature, is crista galli. The flat feature, and that's, I would have to probably say the flat feature, is the cribriform plate. And then the little dots, the little holes, that is the olfactory foramina. So this ethmoid bone could get tagged either way. It could get tagged here in the skull, or it could get tagged on the little structure itself. So you kind of need to know they're the same thing. So there are a few of our structures here. That's just a blown up view again. So that entire thing, ethmoid, that's cristagalli, that's the flat portion here, and then the holes, we'd have to be specific with the naming, is the olfactory foramina. Again, foramina plural for foramen. So now we're going to get into the conchas, and those get to be a little bit harder. So I'm looking at a colored model of this. Unfortunately, we don't have this one, but I like this one to show you, and then we'll look at the white bone ourselves. So basically what a concha is really thin scrolls or kind of flaps of bone, and what it does is in your nasal cavity it helps warm and humidify the air as you breathe. So when it gets into your lungs, if it's really like cold or whatever, it helps that. So that's what these little conchas, these little flaps that you're seeing. So this yellow that's here in the middle, that's pretty much running perpendicular, this is known as the perpendicular plate, and this comes and makes up your septum. So if this gets deviated, you might have a deviated septum. So it pretty much lines up with cristagalli, and it bisects the ethmoid bone. So this center is the, and we'll label here in a second the one that looks like that you've got on your page, but that is the perpendicular plate. And do you notice these pink area, these little flaps over here on the side where the hand is? So those are called the superior nasal concha, right there where the fingers are being held here, all this pink stuff here. So here and here, that's the superior nasal concha. So right next to the perpendicular plate, all this other flappy stuff is the middle nasal concha. So this is the middle, and these are the superior, and I'll show you the inferior in a minute. So we've got cristagalli popping up there. You can see those sinuses there. This is the perpendicular plate. And so to the very lateral out, the top layer there, because if this is facing up, is the superior, and all this stuff down here really close to that perpendicular plate is the middle. So let me show you on the white structure. So I've got it turned here. So cristagalli's up here, and there is those cavities. So this first little layer right here that you're seeing, this is the superior nasal concha. And then you're seeing here, these are all the middle nasal concha that you're seeing. The rest of that right here is middle. So that very first little layer is the superior, the rest is all the middle. Let's see another view of it. So here's that perpendicular plate, and then these two are the middle nasal concha, and this outer layer here that you're seeing, that is the superior nasal concha. You can see it a little bit over there too. So I'd like you to take a moment and look. There's cristagalli there. Cristagalli is up there. So you can see that. And I'm holding where my finger is back there is that cribriform plate. It's hard to take pictures of this, so it's better for you to actually have your hands on the structure and see. So I'm looking at the posterior view here. This is the perpendicular plate, because when we look at it from behind, this actually is all the top layer. So this is all the superior, and this is all the middle nasal concha that you're seeing. This is up far in your skull, so we can't see this, but we are going to be able to see these as we look through the nose of the skull. We'll be able to see that perpendicular plate as well. This is just another view. Again, superior, there's middle. This is actually the perpendicular plate that we're seeing cut through here. And so here's this. I wanted to show you this one before we get into labeling the one that you have in your notes. So do you notice that the superior little flaps, they actually sit way back behind the nasal, so we won't be able to see that one at all. And so if that one gets tagged, it'll get tagged on the small model. But the middle nasal concha could, and the perpendicular plate could get tagged in the nose. So right here inside the nose, the very middle, so not here because that's vulvar, but right here, that's the perpendicular plate. And then if I look up to the lateral left and right of that perpendicular plate, the above there is going to be the superior, the superior is way up there. It's going to be the middle nasal concha. And then below is a completely different bone. It's not on the ethmoid bone, so it's a bone that we haven't picked up yet. That's going to be the inferior nasal concha. So when we look through his nose in a minute, we can see the inferior nasal concha and we can see the middle nasal concha, but we will not be able to see the superior because it's back up in his behind its nasal bone. So let's show you on, so you should have this one in your notes as well. So this right here is the perpendicular plate. All right, if this is the perpendicular plate, this one here is the middle. You guys can draw out to your white, middle nasal concha. Remember, the superior is way up and we can't see that one. Not in this model. So that, both of these little flaps to the side here. And then these little flaps here, the lower one, these are the inferior nasal conchas. And while we're here on this diagram, we'll go ahead and label here. That is the vulvar bone again. Alrighty, I think we've got that labeled up.